So a couple announcements, then we'll jump into the project. So first announcement, barring any major objections, I plan to host office hours, and if you have me for 402, I plan to host that remotely tomorrow. So you don't have to attend by any stretch for tomorrow's class, if you happen to have me for tomorrow again. But if you want to meet up here in the classroom, it's reserved for you all, so feel free. It's not that many work days that you have. I hope you all had an opportunity to discuss in your groups who's going to do what. Like I say, I'll be assigned into teams, so feel free to message or call from any time from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m., and I'll be able to get back with you pretty quick. So yeah, you guys know how to use Teams, right? Like I say, you're free to come to this classroom. I just won't be here. Yeah. Other than that, any questions before we begin? All right. So last semester, if you think back, we had Packet Tracer. Okay, so Packet Tracer, the idea was it's going to give you a lot of tutorials for various tasks in networking. Okay. And, you know, what are some of the things you all did in that last semester? Okay. Okay, so that's something you probably did. You probably also did some basic scripting on routers and switches, right? Okay, I think that's something that you do in there. So this semester, there's not really any software like that that I could just assign. Okay, so instead what I've decided to do is to have you all write basically an information security policy that includes business continuity plan. Okay, it's a big, daunting task, right? Well, the good news is it's split up. Okay, so I've assigned everyone to a group. So let's take a quick little look at these groups right here. All right, so once Canvas finally loads, we'll be able to see these. Okay, so here's the groups. All right, so 4 teams. All right, you can read your name on here, I'm sure, and that's who you're going to be working with. Okay, so remember your group number. That's going to be important. So does everyone see who they're working with? Did I forget anyone? I hope not. So any questions about the groups themselves? All right, we're going to have time to, discuss with your group, that sort of thing. But for now, let's go back over to the home screen and look at the project firm. So you remember your group number. All right. And this is a document that has your company. Okay. So who's group number 1? All right. You guys got Mac Hamburger franchise. Okay, you can probably guess what that may be based on. All right. So you have a single franchise, 150 employees. You have a budget listed there. That's going to be annual, of course. And again, it's your job to come up with a plan. We're going to go through what that plan needs to include at a minimum. All right, who's group 2? All right, you guys have J-Mart. Okay, you want to take a guess at what that may be based on? Kmart, exactly right. Okay, so, you have your specifications there, that sort of thing. All right, group 3, who's group 3? You guys have Fantastic. Okay, what's that based on? Uber, exactly right. Okay, so you guys have a $150 million budget. Now, you're not actually getting quotes in this for this project, okay? If you have me for 402, you are getting quotes for that project. But that just kind of gives you an idea about the financial health of the company. Okay, if you could spend $150 million on an IT budget, is that fair to say that's a pretty healthy company? I think it's pretty fair to say. All right, who's group 4? All right, you guys have Ma's Bakery. Okay, it's a small independent bakery owned by your mom. All right. So you have the budget there, and that's what you're doing. All right, any questions about which company you all are doing? All right, let's go over the actual project itself. Okay, so let Canvas. I'm just going to download the file so I don't deal with Canvas. All right, so again, you're working with your group, okay? And what you're doing is you're creating an entire IT security plan, okay? So you're going to start off with a title page, okay? Then you're going to have a 1 to 3 paragraph executive summary. You're going to have a table of contents, and then after that, you're going to address every one of these items, okay? So this is going to be doing the last day of class on Friday. All right, so I think that's May 6th. Is that right? When's the last day of class? Okay, so I'm pretty sure it's May 6th. All right, so in general, for each of these items, like for instance, your vendor or vendors you're going to go with, you're going to use a paragraph for that. Okay, for the standardization, or if you're going to allow customization, you're going to give a paragraph for that. Okay, for update cycles, you're going to give a paragraph for that. Okay, that's a general thing. Now, with an acceptable use policy, that's the first item you're going to have. Okay, can you fit an acceptable use policy inside of a single paragraph? Probably not, right? So what I suggest you do is to go online and look at companies' acceptable use policies. Okay, that's going to give you a good idea about what should be included in that. That's going to be a pretty big item. Okay, it's probably going to take a whole page. Maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more, but in general, you'd expect to see an acceptable use policy take up roughly a page, right? So, when I say take up a page, what I mean is this is going to be 12-point Times New Roman, all right? I like 12-point Times New Roman. Okay, everything that you do should be 12-point Times New Roman in this class. Does that make sense? All right, so again, you're going to write an acceptable use policy. It's going to be tailored to your company. You're not going to copy one that you find online. Having said that, I would certainly encourage you to start with one that you find online and modify it. All right, why would you start from scratch? Okay, is there a good reason to? There's not, is there? All right, so certainly start from one. Don't plagiarize. Change it enough. Then you're going to discuss the hardware policies. Okay, so again, you're going to have probably, I would say, roughly 5 paragraphs here. Okay, so you're going to start off with which vendor or vendors you're going to buy hardware from. All right, you may decide that it makes sense to be a Dell-only shop. You may decide it makes sense to be an Apple-only shop. I really don't care. Okay, you're going to say who or whom you are using, and then why you went with them. All right. Then you're going to discuss whether you're going to allow for customization of hardware. Are you going to have one model and everyone has the same model? What are the advantages to that? Does it make support costs a lot lower? Yeah. Okay. What about customization? Does everyone need the same thing? They probably don't. So could you make an argument that you can actually get lower end models for most people, and then the people who need higher end models, you might save money that way? Could you make that argument? Sure. So you're making that argument there. Does that make sense? Okay, update cycles. How often do you refresh the equipment? I would say stick to a 3, 4, or 5 year window, and tell me why you selected that. So if you go with a 3-year window for an update cycle, what are you going to say is the reasoning? Why would you go with a 3-year over a 5-year? That's certainly a good reason, okay? So like Nick was saying, if you do standardize on something that's very low end, 3 years you might have to replace it. That may actually be less expensive than getting high end and replacing it every 5 years. Not to mention, your average performance, you could make an argument that it will be better doing that. Make the argument. All right, that's what you're doing there. All right, lease or buy. So does your company want to lease its hardware, or do they want to purchase it? And you're going to say why. So if you go with buy, you may say we believe it'll last 5 years, then we can basically sell it at residual value, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Alternatively, if you want to lease the equipment, you may say we get better financing options this way, and it's advantageous from a tax perspective. Okay? That's all you're doing there. Does that make sense? Is anyone confused by lease or buy decisions? All right, certainly something I would imagine they've covered in other classes at this point. All right, you guys have taken accounting, right? Okay, you guys talked about leasing and buying, right? Okay, probably also covered it in finance, I'd imagine. All right, asset disposal. How are you going to dispose of your IT assets? All right. Are you going to remove the hard drive or solid state drive? Certainly should, correct? What if you can't? Yeah, what if it's soldered in? So you could, use something like DBAN or some commercial software to basically repeatedly wipe and replace it with something else. That's an option. What if it's particularly sensitive data? Are you going to take it out back and shoot it with a shotgun? That's for you to tell me, okay? Maybe you want to take it out back and drill through the storage chips. Okay, you got a lot of options there. Does that make sense? So you're going to tell me how you dispose of the assets. Okay, so that includes any volatile and non-volatile storage. That includes the device itself. Are you going to donate them? Okay, if you donate them, you can pretty much assign the value yourself, right? So if I say that this laptop is worth $250, okay, and I got 200, okay, how much is that? $50,000, exactly right. Okay? So we can write that off if we donate them, right? No, let's face it, okay? In the enterprise space, no one's paying $250 for, a 3, 4, or 5-year-old laptop, all right? Probably more likely to get like 100 to 150. Okay? But it's money that goes straight back to you. Okay. Now, if you donate them, okay, you can virtue signal that. You can use it in your marketing. All right. That's certainly going to be an advantageous thing, right? So you're going to tell me which one of these approaches you think is better and why. Okay. Does everyone understand what you're doing with asset disposal? All right. Software. What software do you allow to be installed? You're going to say, are you going to use a whitelist, a blacklist? I guess I should have also put up here, just straight up give everyone admin rights. And you're going to explain why you made that decision. Okay? So if you give everyone admin rights, presumably you're going to have lower cost to install software, right? Presumably. Okay, you're going to have a lower overall support cost. However, you open up a lot of worms there, don't you? Okay? So it's not just a can of worms, all right? If you allow anyone to install anything, you're really opening up probably a whole dumpster full of worms, okay? So, you're going to tell me what you selected there and why. And then you're going to talk about license management. Why do we care about license management? Exactly right, okay? So, you want to ensure that you're being in compliance with whatever the license stipulates. So you're going to say, is that done centrally? Is that done by department? Is that done Not at all. Okay? And you're going to say why you selected that. All right, then finally, you have your approved applications. Presumably your company has some applications that they're using, right? Is everyone with me? So you're tracking the vulnerabilities of that, and you're describing how you go about that and how you handle when there is a vulnerability. Okay, this also includes scanning the systems for vulnerable applications. All right. Next part is malware. How to prevent it. So that's going to be probably more than a paragraph. Why is it going to be more than a paragraph? Can't we just say we're using an enterprise antivirus application and leave it at that? Why can we not leave it at that? That's only one part of it. Exactly right. Okay? So like Patrick was saying, we're going to have a lot more than that goes into preventing malware. Okay? We're going to have a strong firewall. Okay? We're going to have strong administrative protections. All right, those are just some of the things. So again, that's probably going to be a couple paragraphs because you're going to have to address the network aspect. You're going to have to address the endpoint. You're going to have to address the user. You're going to have to address everything. Probably not going to be more than 3 or 4 paragraphs though, right? All right, then lastly, or not lastly, but lastly for malware, how do you handle a malware infestation? Okay? That's going to be more than a couple paragraphs as well because there's different types of malware, correct? Okay, so first you're going to have to investigate. You have to see what was affected. All right, see which files were accessed. See which files were modified. All right, if nothing was modified and it's just a nuisance like adware, just remove it and go on with your life, right? This is a big one as well, though. Because if there were stuff that were accessed, you have to say how you're going to address it. All right? Network. Similar to hardware, only I consider hardware to be more like computing devices. I consider network to be more like network, switches, routers, that sort of stuff. Maybe even IP phones. All right, so you're going to say which vendor or vendors you're going to go with and why you selected them. So if your IT budget is $150 million, is it fair to say you're going to go with or at least you have the option to go with a higher end vendor than if your budget is 50 grand a year? Yeah, if your budget's 50 grand a year, you're probably going with like Ubiquiti Unify, right? Okay. If your budget's 150 million, you can really pick who you go with. All right. Now again, just to clarify, you're not getting actual quotes here. You're just describing which vendor you believe would be best and your reasoning for it. Does that make sense? Is anyone confused by anything so far? Ron? I don't think so. So like, let's say you wanted to go with Meraki. You can just say they're easier to manage and they have an ongoing support plan that would be beneficial to our company. You can go on the website and find that. You don't have to get a quote. Does that make sense? All right, what update cycle are you going to use for your networking equipment? Now, is it fair to say this may be different depending on if you're talking about the back end or the front end devices? So for instance, let's say that you had a traditional office environment. Let's say it had 10 floors. You might replace the individual switch for the given floor. You might replace that less frequently than you would replace, say, the back-end switch. Is that fair to say? So you're going to come up with that. All right. What support contract do you want to purchase? So in general, I would certainly recommend that you purchase some sort of support contract. That's going to be very beneficial for that network hardware because a lot of it, you don't even get updates if you don't have a support contract. All right, if your networking equipment's not getting updates, what does that mean? Possibly has vulnerabilities. Not necessarily, but it probably would. All right. Then finally, you're going to give me your network security plan. So you're going to describe your basic firewall policies you're going to be using. what ports you're going to have open and closed and why. If you're going to be using stuff like 802.1x, which you should, but leave it up to you. And I'll also leave it up to you if you decide to do 802.1x on both the wired LAN or if you just decide to do it on your Wi-Fi. So that's what you're doing there. Okay, then finally the last part is going to be the business continuity plan. All right. So you're going to write a business continuity plan for your company. Okay. So this is, again, you're going to look at examples online, but don't copy anything. All right. Certainly get inspiration. Good artists, what do? I don't remember. But the bad artists, they steal, right? Okay. So that's what we're talking about here. So you're going to address the following. If employees can't access the building, if there's no power, if there's no building, okay, if there's unexpected turnover, and also if there's no internet at the building. You're going to address all those problems. Questions? It doesn't directly. It just gives you an idea about, like if you had a really low budget or low budget relative to the size of your company, your update cycle for the hardware may be longer. Those sorts of places. You may buy lower end hardware. It's just going to be a general thing. We're not going too specific here. Does that make sense? Other questions? Yeah. That's just saying that your company, you don't really have to be that concerned with buying the highest end hardware to last for 5 years. You can buy the cheap stuff and you'll be fine. Other questions? All right, go ahead and get with your groups. I'll stick around. If you have any questions, have a good one. So again, my suggestion to you all is that you go through and you sort of like divvy up the different tasks, but you can do whatever you want. If one person wants to do the whole thing, hey, whatever.